Welcome to the Menopause Unplugged Podcast with me, your host, Nikki Oliveira. On this podcast, we will hear from women who are navigating the challenging and transformative journey of perimenopause and menopause. These women have graciously agreed to share their stories and insights, offering a raw and honest glimpse into what it's like to go through this major life transition. From hot flushes to rediscovering themselves, our guests will provide a wealth of knowledge and inspiration for anyone who's going through or will go through menopause. So grab a cup of tea, settle in, and join us for a fascinating and enlightening discussion. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to talk about testing in the menopause. We know that testing our bloods to check our hormone levels is key to understanding which one of our hormones have declined so that we can get the medical attention that we need, right, to top up our hormone levels. Unfortunately, some doctors are dismissive when we suggest that we could be perimenopausal, but there are other options for us. I have actually partnered up with Randox Health to share with you their in-clinic menopause health test. They measure all the hormones that need checked, including testosterone, progesterone, and estradiol levels, all within 2 to 4 working days post-appointment. And with over 20 clinics across the UK, understanding your health has never been easier. So if you do want to find out more, head to the link in my show notes. Hello and welcome to the Menopause Unplugged Podcast. I'm with your host, Nikki Oliveira. Today we have a VIP guest on the podcast. I am thrilled to be joined by best-selling author and menopause trainer, Amanda Thebe. How are you, Amanda?
I'm great. Thank you for having me on today, Nikki. Great to be here.
Great. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Now, I know I've got your lovely book here, Menopocalypse, so we will touch on that during the show. But I want to really just dive into, first of all, your experience with the menopause. Can you let us know how did you come across the fact that you were menopausal?
I started feeling unwell, Nikki, at about the age of 42, and it sort of came out of the blue because, I was a fitness trainer and I was sort of feeling really good and healthy and felt like I was a pretty good role model. But then I started having these feelings where I'd lose my balance. I'd feel dizzy. I just felt different and odd, a bit discombobulated, but then it sort of got worse. And some days I would be in bed with it, not being able to stand up, feeling sick, having to crawl across the floor. And so I eventually went to the doctors after ignoring it long enough. And he was like, oh, it sounds like something to do with something neurological. Let me send you to a neurologist and get you checked out. And so that was sort of like the start of me not feeling quite myself. Something that started to feel like it was impacting my quality of life. And then me going down a 2-year road with the doctors. Now I'm here in Canada and my doctors were great. They were listening to me and they were really helpful. But they just didn't know what was going on. And I spent 2 years having test after test, like it must have cost hundreds of thousands, like MRI scans, CAT scans, you name it, multiple specialists. And each one were saying, well, we can see that you're not doing very well, but we don't know what the reason is. And it was, by this time, I was experiencing more and more symptoms. They all seemed to be neurological for me. It was depression and headaches and losing feeling in my face, falling over, and then just not being able to have the energy. I think that was how, I just felt like so tired all the time, but nothing like very specific, it was lots of things. And then 2 years later, I went for a gynecology appointment, and over here you see a gynecologist for like a well woman clinic, right? And we did that and it was all fine. And then he asked how I was and I started crying and I went, not good, actually. And I don't know why. And he listened to me and said, listen, this is perimenopause. These are very normal symptoms. You've got depression. After some consultation,
Sure.
depression. You are struggling with migraines, with aura. So I never had a headache. I just had the loss of feeling in my face and falling over in sickness. And then in general, he was like, just saying your general fatigue is down to this, is being a perimenopause, and I can help you. And it was a relief, actually, just to know that I wasn't going crazy. But also, I was pretty pissed. I was pretty pissed because I thought, God, all this time, 2 years, and not any of these specialists who really wanted to help me could help me. And so it sort of set me off on this journey.
Amazing. Yeah. So, so let's talk a bit more then about the journey itself, how you obviously came to, that's obviously how you came to start exploring what perimenopause was, and obviously how you could help yourself. So were there any particular challenges you faced along the way?
Yeah. So I don't know, you must be the same because you're doing this podcast. You know, we talk about things and you become curious and you just want to have answers. And a lot of the times I was asking and I wasn't getting any answers and it was very frustrating. So I sort of fell down a perimenopause rabbit hole, so to speak, because I hadn't even heard of perimenopause. So I'm 52 now and I was 44 then. And we're in a different playing field. There was no menopause podcasts or really that many books. And so I started getting books out and reading them and going online. And, you know, I've always been a skeptic and I've always been somebody that feels like I can sniff out the woo-woo stuff, like all of the nonsense out there. And I was seeing a lot of that in the information I was trying to get. And then when I was going to the Menopause Society sort of websites, it's very, very clinical. And at the time I was really struggling probably with brain fog to even absorb what was going on. So I just then decided, I'm just going to make it my mission to just find someone that can do this in everyday speak so that women can hear somebody and understand them instead of being confused or the other extreme being diminished. And so what happened is I just started collaborating and connecting. I think I became the most amazing connector with doctors, mental health professionals, other women who were doing advocacy, patient advocacy like me. And that's how it all started. And I've made a lot of slip-ups along the way, like we all do, falling down into one sort of way of conversation and not looking at the full picture. And it's been a really interesting journey, but it's ultimately how I started a menopause community on Facebook. I think there's 17,000 women in there. And then across platforms, there's hundreds of thousands now just talking about it, but not talking about it in a way that's like, oh my God, we're going through menopause and we're all done for. It was like, why are we experiencing these symptoms? Why are we not talking about them? And what can we do about it? But listening to every woman and not just the ones that complain the most and not just the ones that only have one solution.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So your background is personal training, right? Yeah.
Yep. And nutrition. Yes.
Yeah. So similar to myself. So that's why when I read your book, I was particularly drawn to the section where you say, it's all about strength training. It's not about having to go really airy fairy and just do yoga and just do Pilates. It's strength training, and here's basically how you do it. This is your kind of beginner's guide and a helping hand, which is amazing because I don't think that there is really another resource, in a book form anyway, out there that goes into the kind of same level of detail.
No, I don't think there is. I think there are people that talk to athletes. There's a lot of research happening right now. We probably follow people like Stacey Sims, etc., that are looking at this. But what I wanted to do is talk to the women. We would call them in our language the Gen Pop, but all of the women that are like us, right? That I wanted to talk to them at their level, and the reason I did that is because when I was in the thick of things, I couldn't even think about exercise. And so I wanted to be a voice of reason that said, yeah, we know what you should be doing, but how do you approach this when you just don't feel like you can? How do I use my voice as a fitness professional, and how do you use yours, Nikki, to say, we know what's best for you, but it's not a case of like put up and shut up and just get on with it, because that's just not listening to the women and what they're going through. And truthfully, I don't think I could have spoken like that unless I'd have been through something horrible myself, which I had. And so essentially, we know that some women really, really struggle, and the women that really struggle may or may not need medical intervention, right? And so we're accepting that there's hormonal therapies that are useful and non-hormonal therapies that are useful if women can't take them. But with or without those medications, like, let's just push that aside. There are things that we need to be doing as women for our overall health. Some of them may help menopause symptoms become less impactful. Some of them may just improve our overall health for longevity, etc. But one of the key things that comes up over and over again is exercise. It's the most well-researched intervention. And if we know that exercise can help us in our overall health, and even when it feels like it's not working, like even when we're exhausted and we're so tired we can't get off the sofa, even if we can say to people, but anything works, so go for a walk, because it really, really helps. But then how do we then have the conversation where we're saying, so you understand that moving and exercise is helpful for menopause, but what specifically do we know about menopause? And that's what you're talking about, the strength training. It's key. And it's key for us as we go through menopause and as we age, because we're living longer. We're living till our 80s. So we've got all this extra time as an adult, right? We spend more of our time as an adult, as a menopausal adult, which is really crazy if you think about it, right? It's got all of this time. And we want to do that with the best quality of life. So it's not just that we want to live long, we want to live long with quality. And strength training is one of the keys to making that happen, because it improves all of the markers for improving health and disease prevention. But of course, our bone mass starts to decrease, our muscle mass starts to decrease, and it's the one thing that actually works, right? And so in the book, I was like, how can I make everyone be successful in strength training at whatever entry level they have? And as coaches, that's what we do best, right? We see the person in front of us and we say, we realize you've never strength trained before, so this is how you go. Or maybe you were a seasoned athlete and you've had to stop for a while. Well, maybe try and look at it this way. And so it's sort of giving women the permission to be able to say, I'm going to do it and it'll be on my terms, knowing what I'm doing is really helping myself.
Absolutely. Yeah. Couldn't agree more. So throughout, obviously, once you knew then you were perimenopausal, did you seek treatment then and hormone replacement therapy?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. So I told you I was like a bit long in the tooth when I went into this. I didn't know anything about it. I had all those preconceived notions. Like, I was like, perimenopause? I'm only 44. Like, isn't that for older people? And he was like, he explained the whole thing to me and was like, perimenopause 8 to 10 years, and then you're into menopause, and then you're there for the rest of your life. Well, it was for me, I mean, I was like 6 to 7 years in perimenopause. At 48, I became menopausal. Those 6 to 7 years were really, really challenging. They weren't easy. Every time I felt like I was getting somewhere, I would just fall back again. It was very frustrating. And initially, my gynecologist offered me hormone therapy, and I was like, no way, because I just had these preconceived notions that if I went on that, it would cause breast cancer. I just didn't understand. And so I said no, and I went on an antidepressant, which is also indicated successfully for menopause. And it really helped with my depression, my migraines that I was suffering with. And it worked for me for about 18 months until I started having other symptoms that the antidepressant wasn't helping with. So by this time, was educated. I decided to try hormone therapy, and I was and I still am a very strong proponent of it for those women that are successful candidates, because there's always going to be women that it's not going to be able to be used for. There's contraindications, of course. But when it all came down to it, Nikki, I tried it for 5 years and it was never successful for me. I had a very poor experience with hormones, and it turns out I do have a hormone sensitivity. I could never take the pill, for example.
Yeah.
I had terrible pregnancies. My births were very easy, but my pregnancies were quite challenging. And going on hormone therapy was very challenging for me, and it made my symptoms not just worse, but sometimes so much more extreme that like I just didn't think I could wake up the next day to carry on. It was so severe. And so when it came down to it, I would try them for 3 or 4 months, and every time my husband would say, it's the same thing again. Why do you keep doing this to yourself? And I'm like, because I want to feel better. And he went, but look at you. And so like, I think I needed that other person to look and say it was not doing me any good, but it does do some women good. You know, we're all individual.
Yeah. And I think that's important that, you know, at least try it, you know, see how it works for you. Because, you know, we know that when you start hormone replacement therapy, it's not a one size fits all. There's a lot of trial and error, and different preparations have different absorption, you know, levels for you as an individual. So it is important to
just get a good doctor if you can. I know that's easier said than done, and I completely understand the situation in the UK, of course. But yeah, I mean, having a healthcare professional that can discuss this with you, and then also don't feel like a failure if you decide to go on it, by the way. And then also don't feel like a failure if it doesn't work for you, because there are so many treatment options out there. Just know going into this that there's something that can help you if you need it.
Absolutely, yeah. Because I always say taking hormone replacement therapy isn't just waving the magic wand. There's so many other things that we need to do alongside that or without it to improve our quality of life throughout perimenopause and beyond. So,
and ultimately, that's what we're looking for, isn't it? It's always about, and actually there's a term, menopause quality of life. And so the menopause quality of life you should try and achieve that however works for you, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So that takes me on to really my next question. So we've touched on obviously exercise, but did you make any other significant lifestyle changes then, particularly to your diet or to your overall lifestyle then?
Yeah, like really, honestly, I've got a good relationship with food, and I didn't really have to make a lot of changes. I did put on some weight though, like it was a 10-pound weight gain that had never been there before. And that might not seem much to some people, but for me, it was significant. And I went through the whole, this is menopause, this is blah, blah, blah. I went through the whole thing. And then when I started doing the research for the book and I was looking at what the data said and what we know, I had to have that honest conversation with myself that was like, listen, menopause is one of the biggest obstacles that I've come across. And that's one of the reasons that I'm struggling to move as much as I did before. One of the reasons I'm not paying attention to the food I'm eating. Also the way, the sort of like the convergence of the way our hormones interact, like with our hunger hormones are impacted. So I was always hungry for sure. And I was never satisfied and very stressed. And so like was clearly comforting myself with food. And so there was a number of different things that met, and it was a very difficult conversation to have because I wanted to just blame menopause and it wasn't helpful to me. But what was helpful to me was to just stand back and go, let's just take a good look at this. And I did pay more attention to what I was eating, not in any big dramatic way, but I was like, I've stopped eating enough protein and vegetables, for example, and I'm eating more digestives at 3:00, and I was having too many Ferrero Rochers in the evening. And so like, it was just like things like that. I just went back to my nutrition basics. And eventually the weight sort of came off because I just started paying attention again. But what I did have to do is, one, allow myself time for recovery after workouts, which is something I'd never really done before. I started walking more. That was something I'd never even given a minute of attention to. In fact, I'd probably been dismissive of things like walking. If you can't run, why would you walk? Running, that was for myself personally. And I would look at people walking when I was out running, going, I wish they'd all run. And now when I go out walking and see people running, I'm like, yeah, I'm fine not running, because I actually do still run, but I do it on a schedule. But so taking time to be a bit more present, to manage my stresses, to enjoy things more. And by enjoy things, I mean like spend more time with my family and being present and listening to them, and just not taking on as much work. Like I was able to do that because I have my own business. And so I just created an environment where I knew I was going to be successful, because I wasn't being successful in any way. I put weight on. That was a small part of my issues. I was exhausted all the time. And my relationship with my family was getting quite poor, really. And with my friends, I'd stopped socializing and all of these different things. So I had to start like chipping my way back into having like a quality of life that I felt like I deserved.
Absolutely.
Right? So it was a lot of the things that I wasn't expecting were the things I had to change.
And you've managed to navigate your way through that, and everything is, I take it now, in quite a steady place.
I'm in a steady place, but I know Nikki's doing video here, and I don't look particularly good because I went away at the weekend, and I think someone might have given me COVID or something. We're all sick, people that went away, so I don't look particularly good today, but I am in a very good place. And one of the things I try and use my message for is that, you know, I hear in the UK a lot about the downsides of menopause, and I don't hear about the upsides as much. And I'm actually finding it really troubling. I find it troubling that we're talking about menopause in a disease manner, in a deficient as having a deficiency. And I also think that if we don't give women the full picture or talk about this truthfully, then we're doing them a disservice. And I know women that contact me going, like, is it always going to be like this? Because I never hear the opposite. I never hear that it can get better. And what we know statistically is like the 3 to 5 years following menopause, a lot of women's symptoms will die down. Our hormone levels are low, but they're stable. It's the erraticness of the hormones falling that cause a lot of the symptoms. And all of those things have been very, very rewarding for me, because I'm not having those big stressful spikes of cortisol and I'm not always hungry all the time. Everything's just sort of calmed down, and I'm exercising again. Well, I'm making better choices, and I honestly feel, Nikki, like, you know, you think about these sages. That's what and a lot of cultures think about women that go through menopause as that. And I definitely feel like I'm in a place where I can sit back and take stock more, enjoy life a little bit more, and not feel as overwhelmed as I did for those 8 years. Yeah. And most of the women I speak to in post menopause feel the same way, thankfully. So there's something, I always say it's like a light at the end of the tunnel. It's not a cave, right?
100%.
You know, I think you've heard me say that before, but yeah.
No, 100%. I think, I do. I agree with you. And I think there needs to be more of a positive spin put on the menopausal journey, right? That there is hope, and the things that will get better eventually. It might take a longer time depending on you as an individual. You know, how long that kind of perimenopausal stage lasts, I suppose.
Right. And then, for example, in postmenopause, you know, some women continue to have hot flashes, maybe depression. A lot of women will continue to have the genitourinary symptoms of menopause, the vaginal atrophy it was previously called. Like, for example, the GSM stuff needs to be managed and maintained, and most women should be going to a doctor for some type of vaginal estrogen or alternative moisturizers, lubrication. Let's just make that a very open conversation. But other things, if things are lingering around and it's been a few years since you've been in menopause, go and get checked out. Maybe it's something else as well. Don't always assume that it is menopause. And so I would just say to women, it's really good to sort of become your body's own detective. You know, like really pay attention to how you're feeling all of the time, and record it if necessary, and use that to drive the choices and the decisions that you make.
100%, yeah.
Yeah.
So, is there anything else that you wish you had known before entering the perimenopause? All of it.
Yeah, all of it, Nikki. All of it. So, you know, it's really interesting. So I started this community group on Facebook and just like my Instagram and just talking about it. And then I started writing, and I just gathered this body of work, right? And I just thought, I wonder if I could put this in a book, but I want it to be like Your Best Mate's Guide to Menopause, and you'll read it like that, right? It's evidence-based, but it's how I talk. They didn't want me to lose my voice because they wanted it to be very easily absorbed with a little bit of humor. You know, there's a few funny bits in there, of course, right? But from the very beginning, I was like, I wish someone had just told me. Like, I wish my best mate had told me. I wish my mum had told me. So that's what, like, for me, knowledge, education, and there's tons of resources out there now. The UK is doing a very good job of this. So what I would love is that every woman at the age of 35 went to the doctors and got a leaflet that just said, this is what's expected in your next life phase, right? Because it is a life transition for most women. Of course, there's those women that go into this in a surgical or forced manner. And I'm not disrespecting them in any way, but for the majority of women, that this is a natural life transition. And so we have to understand what's going on, and we shouldn't be blindsided, right? So yeah, knowledge, and conversation, community, right? Talk to your friends about this, like have open dialogue.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's the main aim of this podcast, is to spread that awareness and, you know, make others feel less alone in the transition and in the process.
Well, one of the worst things for me when I had that 2 years of just like floundering in the healthcare system is that because I didn't know, they didn't have that knowledge, right? I couldn't share it with my community, right? And I have a good community. I have a good set of friends, but I started pulling away from that community. And then my most supportive community is my family, my 2 sons and my husband. And I started pulling away from those. Ultimately, then I was depressed, but the thing is, I felt alone and I felt isolated. And the minute I wrote the first article talking about this, I just decided to just decompress and write it down. It exploded because women are definitely not alone in this. We're all going to go through this. And so if that's one thing women take away from even just this conversation, it's that you're not alone. Get some education. There's tons of stuff out there, and speak to somebody.
Absolutely. Great, Amanda. Well, that concludes our chat today. Thank you again so much for joining us on the podcast. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Nikki. Thanks for thinking of me.
And I will link all of your information in the show notes so that people can find you. And I'm sure we'll speak again soon.
Okay, thank you. Take care.
Thank you for tuning in to Menopause Unplugged. I hope you found the conversation to be informative, enlightening, and empowering. Remember, menopause is a natural part of a woman's life journey, but it doesn't have to be a lonely one. Whether you're experiencing perimenopause or menopause, my menopause coaching program can provide reassurance and guidance. Please do reach out to me through my contact details on the show description. And until next time, take care.